I have two experiences that I can share. I'm not sure. Yeah, I could share the second one. It's not too long. Um, well, the little first one actually came from a conversation that me and Kelsey were having. We were talking about or it was mentioned in passing of when you look at people, look at their real awareness, look into their eyes. And I remember when I first started to sing the NUUU, I used to do something like that, but I noticed some people got they couldn't like stand it, you know? And they just kind of because I would just put the intent to look at their true self, not the personal body that I would see in front of me. It was just their true self. And I noticed that some people really couldn't stand that. I think I couldn't stand that too at a moment in time. But anyways, it was brought up again, and I had kind of forgot about that. I kind of just let that go. I didn't really routine myself with that. And anyways, um, I had decided to look at myself, and I was shocked when I had looked at myself and others, like my family and stuff like that. I was shocked how clearly I could see what was afflicting them, like in a sense of, okay, so for example, when I had looked at myself, I could see that there was this almost like a silver veil in front of my body. Like I'm not sure, it almost looked like a mist, but it was silver, like the metal, or like the, I don't know, alloy, I guess, the metal. And yeah, it was like a silver mist. It was just all in front of my face, and it was down to my legs. So I was kind of looking at that like, what is that? And I could see certain other things with my family members, just some of the things they were carrying in their consciousness. I was shocked, like I said, at how clear that it came with my awareness that I could see these things. I didn't, because before it wasn't like that. And like I said, I didn't really routine myself to do that, to constantly look at their true self rather than the personal self. So I'd kind of let it go. And so kind of going back to it, maybe perhaps more aware now, it's opened up. It's like a whole new realm to where I'm able to see what's afflicting myself and then others in a sense. Of course, I haven't shared that with anybody or like tried to tell people, oh, there's this and that, because I'd rather do it for myself first to see like a confirmation, instead of just maybe confusing people. But I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The second experience. Let's see. I gotta go on my notes. I wrote it down here. Let's see. This dream vision actually came. I was at an appointment. It was just yesterday. Excuse me. I was at an appointment, and I remember every time I go to these little appointments, it's acupuncture specifically. Every time I go to these appointments, I always invite the guides to help the lady um, do her acupuncture if she's willing, if they're willing to assist her, or even bring in my true self and have myself assist her to really help me out because I have this injury and whatever. Well, anyways, I remember because she'll kind of leave the room, let the needle sit, and she'll come back and put in more. Well, anyways, when she came in the second time, I was almost out of my body to where I was just kind of viewing her and myself laying on the table. And I could see that it really wasn't her at all. It was Rebisar. He was in his robe to where you could only see his beard and maybe like his nose. But was wearing that maroon robe, and he had the golden cord around his waist. Well, anyways, he was kind of going around and he was putting the little needles in my back. And when he was putting all these little needles in my back, it really just freed up the body. It had just kind of dissolved all this funny stuff. And I could see that. So he was really there assisting me with that. He was willing to do that for me. And anyways, what that had done for me had put me in a state to where it was like I just seamlessly transitioned into the real side of an experience. And it really wasn't an experience so much as it was impressions. And the impressions came as this, and I'll read it as I wrote it. I said, I could see that on the earth we struggle and suffer. And in that struggling and suffering is an opportunity for us to bring in the real light of the isness for comparison to what we is and is not. The struggling and suffering of creation becomes our reality without the real references of the all is. But in any situation, whether we are traumatized, in pain, aching, suffering from illness and disease, we can look to the isness and sun shining as a comparison for what we deal with here. And in that comparison, the isness is given permission, or you might say we become agreeable to be more. In this facing of our challenges would truly ease our struggles and ease our suffering to where we are okay. Truly, truly okay. Not only with what we're going through, but in being aware of what we truly is. And that this challenge of the creative realms doesn't make us who we are, but rather help us to remember who we truly are. And that is free beings of real light. We are never becoming our true selves, but waking up to it or remembering who we already is. We all have already met ourselves in the true sense because it is us. And so through the creative process of struggling and suffering, challenges, do we see who he is? And truly, realistically, we shouldn't take these challenges for granted because they help us. And so that's kind of what, because this, as I slipped off into the real side, that was being impressed upon me. It was being said to me very clearly, and I was kind of encouraged to bring that forward and share that these creative challenges, they're really, they they're not fun, you might say, but they really do help us become more aware. They're like little gems, little pearls of wisdoms, these little golden opportunities, you might say, to really kind of focus and become more aware and compare. So I wanted to share that.
Yeah, that was excellent, Jeremy. And yes, recognizing the situation here and how it's set up. And yes, we go through the struggling and suffering because we're to do that until we come to a point to where we want to figure this out. Why am I always struggling and suffering, etc.? And yes, it is. It's to wake us up. And it's to eventually get us to the point, like we're here for those that step up and be creative. So instead of being the effect of just struggling and suffering with what the personal self and our personal self thinks is a life here, we wake up to recognize that we can creatively utilize ourselves instead of just going through what we've come to know here one-dimensionally into a multi-dimensional position of assisting, what all life is. In other words, being agreeable to what life is doing itself. And that's a big step to do that because the personal self, is very alluring in its own way. And yeah, that's a big decision for us. But as we do that, we gain the comparison. We need that comparison. And we have different types of comparisons within the physical realm here, in creation, the different multi-dimensions. And yes, to recognize, eventually first recognize, and it's not just the idea of it, but to actually recognize how it already is with all life. And so what life is looking for from us is the agreement to support what all life is. And so we need the struggling and suffering to get to the point where we're motivated to want to be more than just struggling and suffering. So all of a sudden we turn that around to being creative. And this is where you see movies or you read books or hear stories about people that were poor and they lived really poor and they had hardly nothing, etc. But little by little, one of the, maybe the kids or the dad or something decided to, had to leave home for a while or something and go out into the world and try to figure something else out. And that's really what we're doing, get an objective view and then come back and said, honey, I've struck it rich. And so we'll all be fine. So again, that struggling and suffering should motivate a person. So again, it's like this too, as people step up, they kind of see that, whoa, this is a lot. So they'll just say, well, you guys are nuts, or it's a cult or whatever, because they will use that as an excuse. But what they're really saying is that this is a whole lot, and I don't feel like going through this process right now. but you've got to. You've got to go through some kind of process to wake you up, to alarm you, the hurt and pain and whatever, etc. Yeah, you avoid it the best you can, but this is cause and effect creation. And yes, it's all a wake up. It's all part of that wake up. And so this is where people get caught in these different ideas, and we've all been there, past teachings and whatever, and they're all fine for what they are. And just like school and just like high school, at some point you pop out. It's time to go. You're done, and go figure it out. And so each one of us decides that individually. When that is going to be, when we have the awareness, and even though it's presented to us many times, we back off. I know through my own experiences that, many things from the boys have been presented, and I backed off at times because I wasn't ready for it. I mean, it was a whole lot. It was even scary. And so we go through this process, and it's an endless new moment process. And so as we casually go through it and take on the experiences, but keep going, we eventually have the position where we're okay with it and we can deal with it. Just like a mother with a child and the growing pains and all the things they go through. And I look at my former wife and how she dealt with the daughter, etc. And when I was there. And so she dealt with it like a mother, no matter what goes on. Yeah, she'd get upset or whatever, but she would deal with it, and she'd, have the compassion and, just take it on, because that was her daughter. Women are a little bit different than men. And so it doesn't really matter. The end result is what we really decide. So I see that, yes, I could have stayed there with that personal self, that family, but I chose to do this. And so overall, it can all come together. That's the best part, kind of like in the movie we saw, that Mission Impossible episode last night, to where by the very fact that Tom Cruise left his wife and he had done this mission, he saved a lot of people in the process, and she eventually stepped up and recognized it. And so that's the idea. So we have these people with us that don't recognize it. We need to get on with what we do recognize and just do it. And whether they agree or not, that's not the idea. We will all be together through this endlessness life is, and at some point, they will return. And I saw that last night too. I was walking up these huge steps. One of the boys, and this fella, he was a dark fella, he was walking down the steps back into the lower worlds, and I looked at him as he was walking down there, and he kind of looked back at me, etc. He was with somebody else, and I could immediately see that I will see this person again. Who knows? It's not a time factor. It's just that all of a sudden it is what it is by the choices that we each make. And so that intent and the choices and how sincere we are, and all these things that occupy us, how we, get them focused to formulate on something that makes sense with what life is the best we can in the personal self and in the real self. And then, it's just like your experience, Jeremy. There is a freeness there, even though you're still in the body, etc., and you have to deal with it. But you have this awareness, this sense about it. And so it's about all life, and you're already in it. And to recognize the real awareness, because this is what it takes for us to recognize what we already is. That's what's so cool about it. And get past the creation element and see the difference between what already is and creation. So getting people to take a look at that first is the words and the explanation. And then eventually, will they take the time to learn to see? You have to learn to see it. It's not just figuring it out with your personal self. No. You have to learn to actually see it. And so, yes, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you.